today we're going to look at the models of learning. And there's the patterns of learning, the stages of learning, Edgar Dale's cone of experience, which some of you might have heard before, and Bloom's taxonomy. Okay. So, first we're going to look at why do you want to teach? When I first started teaching, I did it because it was practical and I actually didn't think I had anything to give. So I didn't come from a very good background of wanting to do it. And what happened was, as I was teaching, I taught second grade, after I graduated from university. And what happened was I had a lot of students that were coming from non-Christian families. And I had majored in art, so you think that art would have been my favorite subject, but actually Bible was my favorite subject because we were in a small Christian school. And so as we would share, I would share the stories of the Bible. It was like I saw these kids and the way that, because of my passion for it, I saw them go, oh my gosh. And out of the 2 years I was there, 13 kids came to the Lord, which is gigantic. And so I think that's when, I think it started earlier, but I think that's when God was like, I can use you as a teacher for my kingdom. And so now most of my teaching is in a YWAM context, and so it's usually having something to do with the Bible or relating to each other or like counseling type of issues. But it's always to help people realize who they are and to become who they're supposed to be. So it's similar to the influence, but it's like I'm addicted to getting people going forward. So, do you guys know some of the history of teaching, like where it started?
It started before Jesus.
Probably before Jesus.
Jesus is
Like
always the
Moses
right
maybe?
answer, right?
Moses with the
I
thing.
swear it was really crafted, you know.
Yeah. Right. It did start with God saying to Moses, to teach your children, have the children be taught. So I think that would be, from a biblical standpoint, that's definitely where we have it today. I know that a lot of the Christians, fast forward many centuries, the Christians also, when they came to this country, they wanted their sons and their daughters and the kids to be literate, so they started teaching them so that they would be able to read the Bible, so that they would be able to understand biblical overview or worldview. So anyway, so that's kind of a little bit of a tiny bit of history. And so for me, the purpose of teaching was really to instill values into the children below, or into the next generations, let's say. That's a better way to say it. To instill into the next generations. So I think that actually is one of a purpose of teaching. So
Cause the students to
I
learn.
think of
cause the students to learn.
a very cliche phrase. Give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, feed himself.
Right.
So when I think of teaching, it's and it can depend on what you're teaching them, but in a lot of ways you're equipping people for life.
Yes.
You want to take them beyond
Yeah.
being dependent on other people in certain ways, or not being able to think for themselves on certain matters, and it just kind of expands who they are in a sense,
Right.
as you learn.
Right. Think of a child in a family, and your parents are teaching you all during, especially when they're little. They say that between 0 and 3 is the most you're learning. You're learning the most at that time, and you're taking most information. Who you are is mostly formed in those times, which is kind of crazy. All right. So imagine a parent didn't teach their child to go to the bathroom in this right place. What would happen?
Bad stories.
Yeah. So
Or fun
yeah,
ones.
smelly, stinky, always have to pick up. those are the things that kind of you have to, it's like there's a reason why parents are kind of set up, God set it up, to teach them skills so that they will be able to function within a community and be a help rather than a hindrance. Okay, now of course there are some people who have handicaps and that they don't learn, and so that's what you have to deal with. Case in point, my sister's son. So, you know, it's hard, it's really hard. He's a, how old is he now? I think he's 16, 15 or 16, and he is still not totally potty trained, so he has to wear pull-ups and go to the shower every time he poops. So as a parent, you have to make him do that. So that's hard. That's hard. So that's like a super crass one, but anyway, there's lots of other things that you can think of. So yeah, when a teacher is doing a good job, when they have engaged you and they are asking you questions, then you actually are open to hearing. It's the same as evangelism. But anyway, so then you can share your life with them, and then they're actually interested in it. And then the students, I don't know, there's a certain, wow, you're being so vulnerable. Whenever I teach, I actually ask a bunch of questions before I teach a new class. I didn't do it with you guys because we're gonna be doing it through the whole time. But when I have like a short version, like I taught in the counseling school in Salem in March, beginning of March, I ended up taking probably 45 to 50 minutes just asking them questions like, what's your name? Where are you from? Where'd you do your DTS? What were you good at when you were in like between 12 and 16? What were things you were good at, like in school, extracurricular? And these are all related to learning styles. So I'm learning about their learning styles as they tell me these things. What were your extracurricular ideas? Then I usually go in, and it depends on how large the class, because if the class is large, it's going to take forever to do it. But what happens is it engages them, and they're like, wow, she really wants to get to know it. And I'm writing it all down because I refer to it back later to help me remember them and learn their names and so on. So I do that, and then, let's see, I do things like, what has God been telling you during this time? Why are you doing this class? What's the point? What are you learning in this class? So I just do some of those kinds of things. What do you hope to see in the future because of this class? Depends on the school, depends on whatever. But what happens is it creates this relationship. So you can do that in class. So that's why I'm saying it. And when I shared with that class, I used a lot of my own experiences because I have gone through depression and I have gone through some stuff like that. I did share it with them, and many of them were like, thank you so much for being honest with your story, because, well, they're in a counseling school, so they're all there because they have things they need to work through and they want to learn how to work with other people. So it's a little different thing, you know, obviously I was probably more open with them than I would have been with an SBS. Okay, so I would have shared an SBS type of stuff instead. But anyway, that was throughout the teaching, that wasn't at that point at that time. So, as I said before, we're going to be looking at patterns of learning, which is what we're going to do next. Stages of learning, Edgar Dale's Cone of Experience, Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, all these models, there are a billion models of learning and education out there. I just want you to know, there's lots. If you go on and you start looking at university sites, you're gonna be completely like overwhelmed. So I picked ones that I'd known and kind of made the most sense and that I've been actually learned. So this is all under pedagogy, which is the method and practice of teaching, especially as an academic subject or a theoretical concept. So we are in a school of pedagogy, all right? And you kind of need to know that just because you're going to be, if you're a teacher and continue to be teaching, this is gonna come up, and so you kinda need to know that word. This term is originally from the Greeks, and then it kind of, the French took it and the English took it, and it came out pedagogy for English. Okay? Okay, so, patterns of learning. When we're learning a new skill, we have several things that come up. First of all, we see it. We see the skill, all right? The learner first observes a skill. They observe something. Oh, that person is playing guitar. That looks interesting, okay? That would be the first step. It's like an observation of the skill. Or for Mark, you observe that he knows scripture and he knows theology, right? And so what happens is you go, I want to know that. Yeah. So that's a skill that Mark has. Okay, this next part of the pattern is it could be within that same time period. Proficient person or teacher explains the skill. Okay? For instance, I had watched people play guitar for years. I had tried piano. It was hideous. Tried violin, hideous. Okay? But I thought, I'd like to learn something musical. I would really like to learn something musical. And so there was a guy that, while I was teaching that second grade, he played guitar pretty well. So I asked him, would you mind teaching me? And so he began to teach me. And he explained like the basic chord patterns and, and gave me chord charts, like which are the songs with the chord above it. So, okay, so I learned that. Okay. Proficient person or teacher demonstrates with further explanation about the skill. So they don't just explain it, they actually demonstrate it. And well, as we go into other models, you'll remember that this is actually really important that they demonstrate it. Because we learn a lot by not just hearing an explanation. We actually have to see it. So, all right. The teacher guides the learner in doing the skill. There may be lots of mistakes at first. So when I started playing guitar, oh my gosh, pathetic. I was not good at all. Actually, drawing. I should have brought my drawing in because my grandmother painted and my mother painted, and so I watched them painting and drawing all the time. And so I wanted to do that as a little girl, and my grandmother sat me down and she was like, you need to look and see what's going on there. So she sat me down and she's like, I want you to look at that tree and that branch and see how the branch goes down, and then I want you to copy that. And so I started at 6 years old drawing, and my drawings were hideous at first. Okay, they're not good. So, but what happened was that as I continued I still remember that drawing of my tree. Like, it wasn't like this. It was just this weird branch thing, because it was all these different, like, little branches coming off of it, and it wasn't your tree that just was your normal, what we put up on the board. So, it really stuck in my head. And from there, I really liked horses, typical girl. And I was drawing horses all the time. And so typical? It's typical. Get over it, it's typical. So I would draw horses. And at first I'd draw from my head, and then I was like, they don't look right. So I started looking at them and then doing them over and over and over and over, okay? And so that's where I was making mistakes. But then what I would do is look at a true horse, either one that was out in the pasture or a picture of one. Okay, the learner starts to pick up this skill with practice, with occasional input and encouragement from the teacher. All right, so or from somebody else. So I got affirmed in my drawing. I got affirmed in my playing guitar. So I kept going. I kept doing it. Are you done? And then another one, the learner continues to practice the skill even on their own time. Practice makes permanent. Okay, Okay, so if you continue to practice it wrong, it would be wrong. But if you continue to practice it with someone evaluating and yourself evaluating, then you can also, you can actually get better. And then 8, the learner becomes proficient and able to adapt the skill in new situations. So I played the guitar in my room. When I first started, I would play when I got back from school after teaching, and I would sit there and play sometimes up to 4 hours.
That's awesome.
Okay? So one of the things I had to relearn, because I was practicing to make permanent, was rhythms. When I did the school of worship, I really changed and started doing it differently. But I didn't know that until I had my outreach leader in DTS help me, and then different friends, and then school of worship, so that helped. But I also started, when I had done it for 2 years by myself, and then in my DTS, it was a very funny story. I was really scared to do it, and they were asking me, is that on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. They were asking me to lead worship, and I was like, I don't know, I just learned, I can't do this. And they're like, no, we really think you're supposed to do it. I was freaking out. So instead of by myself, now I was leading a DTS in worship. You know, not all the time, because there were other people doing it too, but. So then I went on outreach, and I was leading worship on outreach. And then I came on DTS staff, and then I was the one person that could lead worship, which was crazy. So I had to lead worship, and I was terrible. Like, seriously, I don't think I was that good at all. Like, skill level. Singing I was okay, but skill level on the guitar was hard. So, but then I came into the school of worship, which is a lot more instruction. Paul Balash, do you know who that is? He's written a lot of. He came to my school,
Really?
and he taught me, and he was like, "You're pretty good. You gotta keep this up." And I was like, "Thanks." And now he's like this big worship guy.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyway, yeah. So it's like it just helps, and I still can learn. I think so. And I think that this next one kind of is something that in some cases for a proficient learner, they become to teach the skill to other learners. And then in that teaching, they dive even deeper into it, learning more about it back and forth. For drawing, for instance, I now, I told you I was drawing all the way through high school. I did drawing courses in high school. I did art drawing in university. Was actually my teacher that was teaching drawing didn't know some things that I knew, so I was teaching some of the things in my college classes. And then, but I never taught it. It was kind of for my own personal use, let's say. And then when I came here, it became like a big deal for the DTS to have art track. So I began to put together like different things on art, and that one of the parts that I did was drawing, and I started doing the whole thing on drawing. And now I have a lesson that I teach people, and we got to do during church placement, I taught drawing to the hobby girls.
Oh, nice.
And they did really well. I was so impressed. They were really diligent. And so, yeah, so, but every time I teach drawing, I refresh myself, and I do it more, and I draw with them. So I'm continuing to develop, but I think it's broadened, and so my understanding of drawing and how to get other people to learn how to draw has deepened. So before I couldn't do that, but now I can, and it kind of gives you even more of a proficiency, I guess, in that area. So, does that make sense? You can see kind of a pattern of learning. What I want you to do is we usually draw this, but if you don't want to draw, you can write it. This is like, take the skill or a skill that you know you have, and just on the first top part, put in observation, showing yourself observing doing the skill. And then the next part, what we're doing is kind of doing a visual or writing it out, what we just talked about.
So, writing here the skill the observation that we saw,
Yeah.
the skill.
Yeah. So you were saying aquaponics, thank you. Aquaponics. So,
Okay.
You try?
It's gonna be hard.
yeah, you can draw it, or you can explain it, I don't care. Some people, drawing is actually good for them, so that's why I'm trying to give you an option, because it helps us to kind of conceptualize it a little bit more. And I'm trying to do learning styles.
You're doing a great job, Anna.
Yeah.
I see what you're doing.
Set me up.
I'm smelling what you're stepping in.